quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you, colleagues. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Not seeing any. We have no minutes. There are no deputations. Madam Clerk, did anybody register a question? Take that as a no.
That's correct. No questions.
Okay, and so we'll go immediately to municipal officers and staff reports for direction. First to the CAO regarding the organization chart amendments.
Thank you. I have a little bit of trouble with fog and being able to see, so I may be having to shift my mask a bit here. Thank you. So just as by way of a little bit of background to this report, so I think as council will recall, typically in the first year of each term of council, we go through a review of our structure and our compensation practices and bring a report to council at the end of that year for approval for the coming term. We did do much of that work in 2019, and there was a culminating report to council on December 27th of that year. Through that work, we did identify a number of areas where we needed to have some further consideration in order to keep up with all of the varied demands that we have to meet: provincial direction, legislative requirements, public expectation, council's expectations. So there were a number of areas identified for us to have some further look at. At that time, council had just started down the road of having the building and planning review completed by Performance Concepts. And we had just become aware of the municipal modernization funding that was available to apply to look specifically at some of the service areas and hopefully provide us some good information to help us in some of the areas that we had actually already identified. So we did ultimately go forward, obviously, with the building and planning review that was already underway, and with reviews related to fire, water and sewer, parks and recreation, and landfill site services. Certainly 2020 was a bit of an unexpected year. When we did the work plans and set out the planning for those reviews, it had been anticipated that that would be done by June of last year. But of course, when COVID hit, everything was delayed, and ultimately the reports came forward to council as draft on November 16th, and finally we did get everything submitted to the ministry on December 4th as required to get the funding. So as we worked through the process, certainly council had received the building and planning review and did ask that we prioritize that department as we move forward with that review of our structure. So that's really the focus of this report. There is one other area that is spoken to as well, simply because we have a retirement coming up and we do see some value in changing some job description and a reporting relationship there. So that one came forward as well. So just going on with the building and planning department, and maybe what I'll do is just kind of, there's three main service areas. There's building services, planning services, and bylaw enforcement services that are covered by this department. So maybe I'll just speak to each one individually and let council have some opportunity to speak about each service area once I do that. So the first one would be building permit and inspection services, and as council is aware, we are mandated by the province to enforce the Ontario Building Code, and we do that through the appointment of a chief building official and additional inspectors who must be qualified in accordance with the provincial regulations. So we do have a large number of permit applications. It is a very busy department, and it just seems to be growing. And I think we have pressures from, again, we are seeing growth. We have had a lot of growth. So that puts pressure on the department. We continue to have seasonal residences being converted to permanent residences, so that's busy as well. And of course, we expect much more growth as Lakefield South begins to develop in the coming years, and that is starting to get some legs. Certainly, the act is very large. I don't know how many inches deep the books that Robert and his inspectors have to manage are. They're several inches deep, and it changes quite frequently. And it's just become a more and more complex system for staff to keep abreast of, and also for the industry to keep abreast of. It's very difficult for folks in the industry to keep up. So that impacts the demands on us to educate and to help them through the process. So I think in terms of those services, where what we've recommended here to provide some additional resources and capacity to manage those pressures is some improvement through the revision of 2 existing job descriptions. So not a new job description or a new position, but the revision of some existing ones. So we currently have 2 building inspector positions, and we would propose that one of those positions be revised to a deputy chief building official position. So what that really gives us the opportunity to do is, in the absence of the chief building official, we do have to have somebody designated to undertake the legislative responsibilities of that person. So that would provide us with continuity in terms of having that resource available. Certainly would provide with additional support just in terms of the general needs of the department, managing changing policy, regulation, helping to undertake that educational or support piece to the industry. Would add some supervisory activities related to the permit intake position, which we'll speak about next. Which again would take some pressure off of the manager position in terms of that ongoing frontline response to either people at the counter or phone calls. So just providing some support and reducing some of that overload that's currently on the manager. Certainly we have a big project underway as well in terms of implementing the new cloud permit. So again, having some additional resources there to help manage that project again would be helpful for the department and the manager. The other position is again, it's an existing position. The permit intake, what we're calling it technician, it has been called permit intake administrator. That position was created quite a number of years ago, and the intention there was to provide support to the CBO and building inspectors in terms of making sure that there were complete applications being brought back to the inspectors or the CBO for review. So that the position includes some technical background and technical knowledge in order to do that. The other component of it really was providing administrative support to the whole department. And I think what has been found over time is that the volume of work with the intake duties and trying to provide administrative support across the whole department really has just been too great to manage effectively. There has been a lot of support provided through the Community and Corporate Services Department, but again, that starts to really spread that department pretty thin, and it's just becoming increasingly difficult to sustain that. So really the focus of what we would suggest the change in this position would be, we would change the title to permit intake technician, just to recognize those technical qualifications that are required as part of the job, and focus it on the building services area as opposed to trying to spread it over the whole department, because that really just isn't working. Currently, the position is funded through a combination of building permit and planning application fees. So if this change was put into effect, that would change so that the funding for this position is fully from the permit fee revenue as opposed to being shared by planning application fees and the taxation that supports that department. So I'll stop there with regard to that service area, and if there's questions, certainly Robert's here and I'm here to try and answer.
Thank you, Janice. And we'll start off with, go ahead, Don.
Okay. Through you to Janice. Going back to the deputy chief building official, I know we can't talk names, but I'm just wondering if we have somebody in-house that would have the training to do this job? Okay. And so, as our standard policy would always post internally first. Would they have to take more training? Okay.
Yeah, certainly, yeah, the staff person that we believe we would assign to this role is absolutely qualified by definition and would meet and exceed actually the criteria that we have in mind. Yep.
So it wouldn't even be an interview situation, it would just be changed?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And the permit intake technician, so it's kind of the same question. It's existing and revised, so would that person have to be trained further? Or can that person stay in the role and just continue with extra courses?
So actually, that position is really being backfilled right now because we have been in a situation where we've had a long-term leave of absence. So this is a position where I think we would be looking to recruit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jerry and then Anita.
Thank you. Through you to Rob, I guess. We're looking at promoting somebody or adding workload to the building inspector to make the deputy. If the building inspectors are running hard now, what's the advantage to putting more work on them rather than bringing in a full-fledged deputy inspector who can help fill in?
Yeah, so I guess in this particular context, I think the combination, right, of promoting an individual to the deputy CBO position that does increase the number of hours that they work in a week as well. It goes from 35 to 40, right? So that's going to help in terms of providing that person with some additional time to carry out the additional duties that they'll have. And if you combine that with the second component of what we're proposing here, which is to upgrade the capacity of the permit intake technician to a point where they just add so much more value to the front end of the business that it really has a positive impact on the back end, right? So as it is now, because we've had the backfill position, there's an awful lot of time that we spend, supporting that role of the inspectors and myself. But the idea would be we'd bring somebody in with the correct education so that they could provide very clear and concise and comprehensive responses to the people that come to make application. And that'll free up a lot of time for the inspectors.
And then because you're the one that's dealing directly with this, are you satisfied with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, I did play a role in the development of what Janice has come up with. She, as she always does, she solicited my opinion and my input and was and absolutely did include the thoughts that I had in the final outcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anita and then Sherry.
This is just a small thing. In the body of the report on page 3, you say that the increased wage salary impact is $47.25, but the chart says $39.50. The chart on page 8 says 39.
Yeah,
Maybe
so
not 50.
what we try to do through the body of the report is say what the overall annual impact would be, where in the chart we're trying to say because of timing of how things would be implemented, this would be the actual impact in 2021.
Sherry.
Thank you, through you. So Rob, the new bylaw enforcement officer, would the view be to replace the third party we now have for bylaw enforcement?
Yeah, I think we would probably continue to carry the third party. We wouldn't rely on them as much, but I'm thinking there are instances where after hours work gets done, particularly this time of year where there's parking overnight. So we do rely on the third party to do that sort of work. But I think we would rely less on them, right, as a result of having this person dedicated to that.
Okay, and I'd like added to some of the, whatever you've got for the job description, that one of the things that person would do would be to deal with some of the legal signs that are posted all over our township, that are a blight. And we just haven't had time to be able to deal with those, but I'd like to see some of them gone.
Sure, that's definitely on our radar.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Through you to Rob. Sorry, I didn't know we were going to go right to the bylaw guy too. So, Rob, you and I had a conversation the other day, and for the, I guess the benefit of council, there's 80 to 100 written complaints a year, and they deal with about 5 to 10 phone calls. So I guess again, for our benefit, what's the big advantage to having a dedicated bylaw guy?
Yeah, so I guess from my perspective, what we've seen over certainly my tenure here is that there's been a gradual increase in the number of complaints that we receive on an annual basis. Council has seen fit to make some interim steps, right? So a few years ago, we brought in the third party that the deputy mayor was alluding to, so that helped. And what we're finding is that there's a continual increase in just the workload that we have to deal with on an annual basis. So the way we deliver their service now is it's essentially it's completely complaint based. I think there's an argument to be made that we could be more proactive in certain aspects of the bylaws that we're asked to enforce. So we'll have the flexibility to be more proactive in certain instances. I'm not suggesting we get to a police state here where we're looking for problems, right? But there are instances where it would be important to do that. In terms of developing policies and staying ahead of trends, right? These are like everything else. I mean, we're dealing with changes in legislation. Certainly, council would be aware of the sorts of things we deal with for planning and building. But yeah, there's things that occur that I think if we had the luxury of some additional time, or somebody that was dedicated to doing the work, they could stay on top of it and make recommendations to council to address things that are starting to become an issue or are likely to become an issue. I know there's a lot of pressure to deal with, parking related matters. I think at some point we're going to have to, seriously think about, implementing additional, parking provisions, and of course that would come with, with Part 2 fines and some additional, court time, and so, having a person that has the professional background would obviously increase the professional, professionalism of that particular aspect, and would allow us just to be that much that's much better equipped to deal with the ever increasing workload.
Thank you. And you mentioned the police state too, and I think I would caution, it is a fine line when you're doing proactive as well. It's still a rural community and some things run pretty deep around here.
Donna, did you have another question?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and if I can just add, so, we get that point, and that's not really the intention, but the fact of the matter is we really have no depth in this service area. We have Rob, and as we have added the contracted services, so that has helped, but a lot of these issues are really complex, and it's the amount of time that Robert spends trying to deal with the ones that become very complex, and those are typically the ones that you guys wind up hearing about. There just isn't the time to deal with it and to do the ongoing follow-up that's required to try and get compliance in some of these areas. So this would provide some support to the manager and give us that depth that would allow us to actually be, as Rob said, more proactive in following up with existing type complaints that we're getting.
Yes, through you. I think we kind of jumped ahead on you, Janice.
Yes,
didn't
you did,
get
but that's
all the
okay.
way
However
through
you want to
here.
deal with it is fine.
That wasn't my intention. I just had a question for the first two, and I thought we were going to stop. But anyway, now that we're on to the bylaw enforcement officer, I just wanted to make a point that I think if we pass the 1-year urban hen bylaw, which is very complex and requires a lot of things for a person to do before they have their hens, that this person is going to be really, really busy with that in the summertime, because I had one person try to construct a chicken coop at the first of COVID, and didn't even have the bylaw passed, and it took like many days to get that stopped, and that was just to stop it. So that wasn't to investigate all the different nuances that we have in that bylaw. And I think I did state before that I would not be in favor of passing that bylaw after I've gone through that experience.
Thank you, Don. So, if council will indulge me, I have my own questions. So the first one is directed to Janice. The review that we had done on the building and planning, I believe its recommendation was, one of its fundamental recommendations was to split building and planning into two separate entities, sub-organizations within our organization. And you've chosen to go a different direction, and I'm just interested in knowing why you decided to do that.
Okay, that wasn't my understanding of the recommendation. They definitely did speak to looking at what the options were in terms of the management position for the department. Perhaps I misunderstood the recommendation completely. I'll go back and have a look. Certainly, we did run through various iterations in terms of what the management of the department and really the feasibility of that idea of having it being led by a professional planner. I guess the issue that you run into, there is the demands in the department on the building side and the bylaw enforcement side are significant. And on the building side in particular, if you take away from the manager the qualification of the CBO, you lose a lot of resources that actually let us provide that service in a timely and positive way. So if you do not have that resource as part of your management position, then it would lead to requiring more resources within the department for that function.
The issue for me in it, and we're not going to necessarily agree on it, but the issue for me is this township is going to grow. The volume of work that's going to come in is going to be significant. At least that's my hope, that we're going to see that. And a construct that leaves it all on one individual to manage both building and planning is going to inhibit. The structure will in fact inhibit our ability to give service. Now, at the end of the day, how we structure the staff, I'm not going to intervene as a council member. I don't manage the corporation, I govern it along with my colleagues. But my own personal view is that's a constraint, that will be a constraint, and that we're going to have to deal with it going forward. I want to pick up on Jerry's point. I understand the appointment of a deputy so that they can do certain things in the absence of Robert. But in terms of providing more human resource to conduct inspections so that they're done in a more timely manner, and don't get me wrong, our folks go flat out and get it done as much as they can, but we don't control the demand side, right? We can only control the supply side. So this structure, unless I'm missing something, with the exception of the fact that somebody now works 40 hours a week instead of 35 hours a week, really doesn't add a lot of additional resource in getting building inspections done. Have I missed something there?
Yeah, I think, so we you don't have the benefit of having the job description for the planning intake technician position, but that position will hold certain qualifications, right? In terms of the Building Code Act criteria. It's our intention to recruit somebody that has the capacity to do inspections for small buildings and house, right? So that improves their capacity to critique applications as they come in and be more comprehensive in their responses to the applicants. But it also provides the ability to deal with, say, a real surge in a requirement or in a request for inspections. Typically we can deal with them. Again, as it stands, of course, I fill in when necessary if there's a surge. Of course, we want to rely less on that and provide the capacity with subordinate staff, right? So the idea would be to recruit somebody who could address any unusual surge, say, in a requirement or request for building inspections through the intake person.
Going again back to the consultant's report, and you brought it up, Robert, and that's the qualifications of the new position. And the report said it should be somebody that has credentials on the planning side. And again, if I read the report correctly, you're indicating that is not a practical thing in terms of recruitment, your report.
I think what the report suggested was that you create the development approvals technician and that you hire a qualified person with planning qualifications.
Yeah.
And then you also train that person to deal with the building intake. So what we're saying is, we don't think that's enough resource. We think you have to have that resource with some additional technical qualifications in both areas that would support both the planning and the building function. So like we tried going down the road really of having that permit intake person, that position that we created a number of years ago that would provide the support to the building in terms of the permit intake and also some administrative support to the planning department. It just didn't work. That volume of work is just too great. So that's why we're suggesting that you need the technical support on the building side as well as the technical
but
support on the planning side.
I'm sorry, but that's not my issue. I understand that you're putting two intake positions, and I agree with that. The issue that I'm raising is the qualifications of the incumbents that will fill those positions. That makes a significant difference in the ability to effectively manage the workload, is how experienced. If they don't have a lot of qualifications, what we'll see is a constant stream of people coming from the back office up to the front, because the individual won't have, not through any inefficiencies, but simply they don't have the experience level. And so what I'm looking for is that the two intake technicians you've got in it, and that part makes good sense to me. You got one on the building side, you got one on the planning side, have the ability to complete a whole set of transactions because they have the qualifications, without having to make reference to the managers. That's what we're looking for. That was my understanding of what our consultant was trying to say to us, was key to doing it. And what I can't see, and I could be wrong, is that the plan is to have that level of expertise in those two intake technicians.
Yes, so perhaps it's not clear in the report, but the goal would be to have those types of qualifications in each of these positions to provide exactly what you're saying, to provide the resources so that it isn't always having to go back to the manager for questions.
Well, to Robert's point, I'll be interested in seeing the job descriptions,
Yeah.
if that's
Yeah,
possible.
so I think what we've recognized, and I'm sure council does as well, is that the planning is a profession in its own right. Building is a profession in its own right, as is by law enforcement. And what we want to do is ensure that the development approval technician comes with the correct education and training in planning, because their focus will be on dealing with applications and issues related to planning, and that the building the building technician will come with a background in the architecture and building end of things, so that they can answer questions related to that. Over time, of course, and I suspect they'll come with some understanding of each other's professions, but we'll lean on you know, on the individual that's relevant to the, you know, what the applicant is coming in to deal with, right? And I'm sure they'll work together because there are instances when somebody comes in for a building permit and the technician will recognize that what they're proposing to do isn't consistent with the zoning bylaw. So they'll have to sit together and say, you know what, we're gonna have to meet with my peer because you're gonna need a variance. And my peer is just over here, and let me introduce you. And then once you get through that process, so there will be some cooperation, and they, as I said, they will, if they don't come with, you know, all of this, you know, the cross-training skills, they will over time work. Our vision is that they will work well together and understand each other's profession more and more as they, you know, gain experience.
I'm going to make 2 more points and then I can move on because we can't spend all the time here. Robert, at the, forget which meeting it was, but it was a public meeting. You indicated that at some point you would be retiring after a large number of years of tremendous service to our community. From what you have said, you're a little bit of a unique individual in the sense that you have both the command of the building side and the planning side. And one of the challenges of not making that separation between building and planning is when it comes to succession and recruitment. The question is it going to be possible to fill that position with a single individual that possesses the competency on both the building side and on the planning side? You've done yeoman service in doing that, but I don't know whether that construct for a community that's going to be our size with our volume is going to be practical.
Yeah, so clearly when we developed this particular solution, it was developed with a view towards, you know, what things will look like when I do retire. So, you know, we have some time before that happens, and so the idea is clearly to exercise how this works. Of course, we're hopeful by the start of the third quarter of next year that we'll have the structure in place, and we'll have to you know, put our mind to you know, what the department will look like in my absence, because it's going to be, obviously we'll be closer to that point then. Now we have a sense of, you know, what that might look like. You know, in the end we'll have certainly a, you know, a planning end of the department that will be you know, staffed with, I think, the correct mixture of people. We have a professional planner that's very competent in what she does, and she'll have some support. And, you know, as it stands now, of course, I mean, I support her, but, you know, the department runs, you know, quite well when I'm not here, you know, given the current circumstance, right? So we have that luxury, right, of having some good talent there. Building department really isn't all that different. We have some very competent people, you know, dealing with that, and we're going to provide them with some additional capacity to carry on doing things. And you know, Janice kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of the impact to taxation, you know, it would make some sense to replace or to have the manager of the department have a background in building, CBO, to support the department. But I guess that's you know, ostensibly what the thought is at this point. But again, we have some time to kind of exercise how the department will work over the coming, you know, 8 or 9 months. Right?
The last question I have has to deal with the shifting of the position over to Parks and Rec. It alludes to having a part-time individual, I guess, would become part-time to do the management or oversight of some capital projects. The question I have is, that seems like a reasonable thing. It's a necessary thing, but those won't be the last capital projects that we have. And I'm going to assume at some point that the individual that's been identified to finish up those three projects will leave. And I'm just wondering, are we then in a position where we're looking at needing to have a dedicated part-time individual to do our capital project supervision? Because if I understand correctly, we are going to retain the services of the retiring individual to do just that. So I'm just wondering why we need it now and that we won't need that resource later.
Right. So yeah, those are ongoing projects that that person has been in-depthly involved in. So that providing continuity for those projects, I think makes some sense. It's on. Can I go? Yep. So I think that makes sense, and the individual is willing to do that. I think where we found ourselves previously, we had a real, I don't know a good word, a large number of fairly large projects that we needed to work our way through. And I think that factored into how that job description was developed. So yes, for sure, there is going to be ongoing capital projects. We always know that. This would allow us to transition through the ones that are ongoing with somebody who has the continuity, and then really shift those duties to that department over time in conjunction with the other department managers. And of course, when you have a larger project, typically you do have some outside support for project management for large projects. So it would be a combination of that looking forward. Do you have anything to add to that, Lee?
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, there is a recommendation that it's in the report. There, move it. The recommendation in the report, at the beginning of the report, there's a very specific recommendation.
I'm sorry, through you, are we not going to be talking anymore about the facilities management maintenance
Oh,
coordinator?
I'm
And
sorry, I thought
I
people
don't
had
know if
finished with their
anybody else
questions.
had questions, but we kind of glossed over that.
Well, if you have a question, go ahead.
No, I didn't.
No? Okay.
I asked all my questions.
So, Anita, that's on the first page of the report, the recommendation? Okay, so Sherry seconded. Okay, further conversation? All in favor? Carried. So we will then go to the CEO's preliminary work plans.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, so it is the time of year that staff always come forward with the preliminary work plans for the following year for council to consider. The work plans do try and move forward with initiatives that have been established through our strategic plan and other planning documents, legislative requirements that are coming forward. This time, of course, we have the service delivery reviews that were just completed that identify a number of projects, and obviously the priorities established by council. As always, I just like to note that these plans do in no way demonstrate the volume of just day-to-day ongoing work and issues and challenges and opportunities that come up that we manage on a day-to-day basis. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but 2020 was a very irregular year, I think, for everybody. With COVID-19, it certainly created a huge amount of additional workload for our staff. It's fundamentally changed the way we do business, and I think we will see that that will become the new norm. We will never be doing business the way we have done in the past. That just won't be normal any longer. We've certainly done our best and tried to adapt to the situation and make sure that we're adhering to public health guidelines and ensuring that the township is able, through this pandemic, to continue providing essential services to the community. I have to take the opportunity to thank staff, management team and staff, and volunteers. Certainly have shown great perseverance, have worked very hard, have been creative and adaptable, and just shown an ongoing, very strong commitment to this community to keep us going the way that we have. So just a moment to thank everybody for all of that work. It's been tremendous. Excuse me. And certainly, I guess that situation continues to impact us, and I think will continue to impact the way we do business and the way we would like to go about some of our consultations and things like that, in at least next year, and perhaps moving forward. So the work plans that we've set out for you are very ambitious, trying to keep things moving forward and catch up from 2020. We certainly have tried to have regard for our resource capacity, and the fact that we know there will be these opportunities and challenges that arise during the year that we do need to take care of, and will take additional resources. So when going through here, if there are items that council doesn't feel they would like to proceed with in 2020, and I know Councillor Ballantyne has mentioned one that she's concerned about. So if there are issues like that where council feels it isn't the appropriate timing to move forward with something, we would appreciate that feedback now, so that we know that. And if there's something missing, then of course we need to look at that in terms of the resources that we would have available to complete anything to be added. So with that, I'll just leave it with council to have any questions for the individual work plans.
Okay, colleagues, what we'll do is go through the work plans by title, and I'll just call out each one, and if anybody has any questions on those, they can go ahead. The first one is the CAO. Donna.
Yes, through you to Janice. This is actually on your cover report, and the suggestion that you made that if council didn't want to move forward with some initiatives, that you would be willing to amend the plans. They certainly are very aggressive. My issue was, when I was reading through it now, that urban hen thing was, I understood it because I kind of lived it. And a lot of these things, when you don't live them, you don't understand that how much potentially the work could be. So I was thinking that it would be helpful for us. I know it's more work for you, but to identify some things that you think are really going to put you and your managers over the edge. Because me personally, I found it difficult to pinpoint some things. There are a few things in the committees and boards that I work on that I understand more fully how much work they would be. But I don't know if other council members feel the same, but maybe it's just me, but I was having a hard time identifying some other things to take out of the work plans. So I don't know what other councillors feel about that.
Yeah, and I agree. As I go through them, looking specifically, okay, are there things that I think we've tried to structure it so that it's not going to put us over the edge. I guess if something major comes forward that has a significant impact, as we did last year, we would come back to council with our updates and say, you know what, because of this, we're not going to get to this. So I don't think we're setting ourselves up to push us over the edge with everything that we know now. But specifically, it would be a project like that where there just isn't it's been a priority of council or a direction of council. But if you just feel it's not the right time, then we're just better to know that now going in. than coming back with another report to you and having you say, really, we don't want to go forward.
And I have one other question, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. It might be explained a little further in Public Works, but the curbside garbage collection, and it seems to me I have read about organics somewhere, but are we still going to allow after September 1st, 2021, organics in the curbside pickup? Because we really haven't established, other than digester and composter, another way to deal with it.
Yeah, there is no intention on our part at this point to ban organics from our waste stream for curbside collection. There just is not an option for people. So sure, we're going to encourage use of composters and digesters, but until there's an actual option for people to remove that material from their waste stream, that just to me is not a viable option for our residents and to try and make them responsible for, essentially. So, there is discussion, there is ongoing pressure, I'd say, that's going to come to bear from the province, whether it's a mandate or just pressure to get that type of material out of the landfill sites. So I think those types of programs, though, they really need to be looked at the regional basis. And I know there's been some discussion at the city. I'm not really sure what conversations there's been at the county, but to me, we need to wait until at a regional level, there's some opportunity for diversion of that type of material.
Okay, just a short follow-up. I know this would be a change in the protocol that we established, but would it be helpful if organics was in a separate small bag at each person's property, or does it matter?
No.
Okay.
No, at this point, it doesn't matter because it's all going the same place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
On the CAO, yes, Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely agree with what Donna was saying with regards to we want to make sure that staff doesn't burn out or take on too much. If we look at those 4 reports that we talked about, or last month, whenever it was, with their recommendation and timelines and stuff, I think that, just even reading those 4 reports and their recommendations, it seemed like overwhelming once you kind of put it all together. Anyway, my question is with regards to the link, what's the likelihood of hearing back from the province or the funders with regards to having an extension to April 2025?
That's a hard question to answer. So we do continue to follow up, and we'll do so. I would hope we get that answer in the shorter term rather than the longer term. But again, there's nothing we can do other than continuing to ask the question.
Any other comments? No? Okay, move on to building and planning. Any questions on building and planning? Yes, Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the official plan, I think in the past that there had to be an official plan update every 5 years or every 10 years, and it seems like quite a while since the last official plan update. So when does the province require that the plan is updated, or again, are they giving extensions?
Yeah, so as it stands, we're in the throes and have been in the throes of amending the county official plan, and just by extension, the township's component of. We've been doing that for several years now, right? So I think we're getting closer now. We've had some headwinds in terms of getting accurate feedback, say from the province, as it relates to how they want us to move forward, particularly as it relates to population and growth figures and things of that nature. Now, I think we're closer. I think the county is moving forward with some support in that regard, so that we'll have the kind of background information required to start making some of the policies and some of the decisions. So I think we're hopeful that things will be in place, if not late next year, shortly thereafter. So so in terms of after that point, there will be a 10-year, I think, period after which we'll have to reconsider policies again. But we're trying to get to that point now where we have a solid document that has regard for all of the changes that have taken place from the provincial policy perspective since the last iteration, which was 2008.
Sure.
Thank you, through you. So has the phone been ringing off the hook from people wanting to know where the backyard hen policy is, bylaw?
No, I wouldn't characterize it that way. I do get quite a number of questions, however. How do I characterize? Maybe 20 to 30, I think, people have inquired, right, about about the notion. We've certainly heard that there, anecdotally anyway, that there's a few people out there with chickens in their backyard, and had to deal with a few of them, as Councillor Ballantyne noted. But yeah, that's how I would characterize it. I guess is there are people out there inquiring about it. Whether they're fully committed to doing it or not, it's, I guess, hard to say. But.
Okay, so that, because that's one thing that I think doesn't have to be done in quarter 1 of next year. It's something that I certainly don't hear about. I don't know what the rest of council feels about that. I have a question with the launching the cloud building permit software. Do we have an idea when we're going to be?
Yeah, our goal is like very early January, if not like January 1, but very, very early in January for the cloud building permit aspect of it. Yeah, and because we've already, of course, came to terms with them as it relates to that piece of software. And that's the same firm that's currently in the development of their planning, the planning side of that. That is a new product for them. And that's something, again, we think will take place in the first quarter of 2021 as well. They're just, just going through the process of beta testing for that planning end of things, right?
Okay, so this is like a follow-up. Conducting a customer service survey in quarter 2 and quarter 3, maybe it should wait a bit because I think how the public perceives all of the different software they're going to be able to use might not be enough time to get feedback on that if we do it in quarter 2 when we're just maybe at that point installing the planning software. I'm just suggesting that we make it a little bit later down in the year.
Sure, we can consider that. We took that timing directly from a resolution of council with regard to the building and planning review. But for sure, if you'd like to give a little bit more time to have those technology pieces implemented so that we receive feedback on that, we can.
I think they go hand in glove.
Okay, so I guess we just would need some direction from council then in terms of timing that they would like us to move forward with that.
Would we vote on that?
Well, we'll come back to it. Let's just get through it. And
I'm
then
done.
Changes with Donna on building and planning.
Yes, thank you. I'm beating these poor hens to the ground, but I was just wondering the protocol, if we wanted to take that off the work plan, would we have to have a vote on that today as well?
Well, I think you could give us some direction. If there were changes, perhaps just resolutions to advise what the changes were. And then if you really didn't feel that there was the timing for that one to come forward this year, it could be put back before council at work planning time next year for your consideration if you wished, or if you just, I guess we'd look for your direction. Do you want it to come back in that way, or do you just want to take it off completely?
And this one's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Because council has passed a resolution to bring it into to proceed with it, just hasn't passed the bylaw. If council wants to change its decision and no longer wants to have urban hens, then there needs to be, I would think, a motion to reconsider, and then a motion to vote it down, because that's not just a timing thing. Because Donna, if I understand you correctly, it's not so much the timing as it is you just don't want to do it.
Well, not necessarily. It's going to be a really, really busy year. We're restructuring the building and planning and the bylaw enforcement. And there really are, if you really look at all the rules for 1 year that somebody has to have with the cover inside the the depth of the cover and the number of times it's changed, it could be a logistical nightmare to make sure everybody's following the rules. So I would say it would just be either delayed to 2022 or we look at it in the fourth quarter. I
Jerry?
don't think that I don't want to take it off completely because like you say, we have given the direction and I'm sure Rob has put a lot of time into it. So I would just say it be delayed for now.
Yeah, Jerry?
Thank you. Through you, I'd like to see it stay on because as it's a work plan and we've all had plans before, say even a plan on a weekend and it goes south. It's a plan. That's all it is. It's a guiding document and we all understand that some things are not going to get to or gotten to. So I don't understand why the contest on it. Just leave it on if you want to just make Q4/Q4 done. But I don't think we need to remove it. I think we need to keep it in front of us because again, it's just a plan. That's all it is. It's a simple plan.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I said. Move it to Q4 because there's so many moving parts in that department right now.
Yeah, so if you were to move it to Q4, really I'd say what you're doing, the report would come back to council in Q4 for further consideration. And then the implementation obviously is not going to happen in 2021. That would be considered for 2022. If that's kind of the sense that I'm getting.
That's
makes-
my opinion. I don't know what other people feel.
Election.
We know
year.
what Jared feels.
Okay, so I've got that on the list of things that we can direct staff to do.
Okay. I have a couple other things, but I'll.
On building and planning?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Now these are actually for Jeanette, so I don't know if she's on the line.
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Jeanette, down to the Trent Severn Waterway focus group, it says that TSW placed it on hold. What was the reason for that?
They just didn't have the staffing to continue with it, the staff complement, but they're hoping to pick it back up. I haven't touched base in some time. I was on leave and then with COVID, but I could follow up with TSW if you'd like.
Okay, that would be great. And I have one more. Yes, on the very last part on the last page, the City of Kawartha Lakes zoning bylaw harmonization, technical advisory committee member. And I probably just missed this, but this is not new, correct?
No, it started, you're correct. You started, it would be in 2019. The City of Kawartha Lakes is they have separate bylaws for each of the wards within the city. And they're bringing it all together, and they did ask for neighboring municipalities to provide representation. And we just thought it was a really good opportunity to take a look at how other places, or to be part of how other municipalities are dealing with different aspects of the zoning.
Okay, that's good. And one more, the very last one, the SETI, never remember how to say that, planning subcommittee. Is that going to be going on into the future, or will that end at some point in the next year?
Yeah, I anticipate that it'll probably end, like it won't be a formal group anymore. We're still sort of working through that consultation tool piece, and we do have something on the GIS now, and just sort of working through the First Nations as to when they would like to be consulted, and when they may not necessarily need to, just to sort of triage stuff. But yeah, I do anticipate that the formal group will sort of disappear, but we have developed a really good working relationship with the different First Nations in the area.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette.
Anybody else on building and planning? One comment of my own, directed to Rob. The key piece on the official plan review is going to be the discussion about growth projection and allocations. I would ask that council be kept abreast and informed of those discussions on an ongoing basis. They have really significant ramifications for this township, and I suspect they will be difficult conversations, to say the least.
Yeah, I would characterize them that way as well, and we'll endeavor to do that for sure. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we are on
Andy,
to.
Andy.
Yes, Nancy.
I guess just on that point, I would expect that through because that process will be led at the county, I would suspect that through that process, they will provide opportunity for.
Well, I expect that, but there's also, if I understand correctly, there's a TAC committee that is made up of a technical advisory committee that's made up of staff
Mhm.
that will be having those discussions. At some point, there will be a report from a county perspective to county council. But I want to make sure, because our perspective as a township may not necessarily align with the county's perspective. And so I just want to make sure that my colleagues who aren't on county council have an opportunity to be engaged in those discussions. I don't disagree that there will be information that comes up to county council, but there will be a specific Selwyn perspective that I think needs to be outlined and input sought from this council.
Yes, and I think the TAC committee minutes would come through to council. And I'm hopeful that there would be a formal opportunity to do exactly what you're saying, provided by the county as part of their process. I guess that is my comment on that. In order to facilitate that, we need the opportunity given to us to do that really from the county as well, right? To provide that. That should be built into their process around this growth strategy piece.
Janice?
Yes.
Or
I-
Jeanette, who's, I think, is the individual who sits on the TAC committee.
That's correct. And I believe you'll have a report coming forward. But the county is going to be doing an RFP for the growth strategy, and they're going to be linking in with the development charges update that they have to do. And through that, those population projections and the land needs assessment will be completed. And they're hoping that'll be done within the first or second quarter of next year. And then that's when those conversations will occur that you're speaking of. And the county does intend to provide information to county council, but also to be going to individual municipalities to support the TAC members, so to support municipal staff in giving and having those conversations or providing you with that information.
I don't need to get into the details of it. I just want to make sure that Councillor Ballantyne, Heron, and Locke have the opportunity to help shape Selwyn's perspective. That's what I want to make sure happens. That's different than getting a report that's saying this is done. And if that's what's going to happen, whatever format it takes is fine. But so long as my colleague councillors who don't have the opportunity to sit on county council have the opportunity to help shape Selwyn's perspective on this issue. Okay, anything else on building and planning? Yes, Jerry.
Just to follow up through you to what you're saying about keeping us in the loop there, would it basically, in a nutshell, as the discussions are going on, can we not just get a verbal update, whether open or closed session on, okay, it looks like they're going to allocate a couple thousand units to us, where do we stand on that? Are we happy? We mad? Can you go and fight for us to get maybe 3,000 units or the growth area or whatever? Is that sort of what you're looking for?
Exactly.
Yeah. So is it possible to get an update as the negotiations, I guess that's what it is, the negotiations are going?
Yeah, for sure. So that information can be brought forward. I'm just hopeful that as part of the process where the county's considering this, that they give us a formal opportunity to do exactly that and submit our feedback back to them.
Yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
long as it's after every
It's
meeting.
just wanting to make
Not at
sure
the
that
end.
that opportunity is provided to us as well through the county processes is all I'm trying to clarify.
Okay, corporate and community services, the clerk's department. Anita, why don't you start this one?
Two questions. One is, I think we're going to have a vacancy in this particular department. So will it be backfilled by other staff And then the second question is with regards to the video surveillance policy. Um, Is it video surveillance on any township properties, or what exactly does that policy entail?
Thanks, Anita. You can hear me okay, I hope. So yes, we do have an upcoming retirement at the end of the year. And we are considering how we were going to resource the department. The priority at this point is to get the building and planning department changes up to, I guess, in place. And then we'll kind of take a look at how that flows into corporate services. Because at this point, we do a lot of backup for the building and planning department. So we'll take a good look at the current positions we have in the department, where the new positions are implemented through the building and planning review, and then we'll be able to kind of determine who does what. But all that to say, there will be a lot of backup, and we're going to have to shift and redistribute the work between the existing staff that we have in the department. And so that will be a bit of a challenge for the first part of the year for sure. In terms of the surveillance policy, we do have a camera at the two arenas, and we also have a camera at the landfill. So we just need to be mindful of how that data is collected, what the retention is on it, how it's destroyed. So we just need a good policy to deal with
that. Thanks, Angie. I understand about the retirement, but there's the other vacancy with regards to mat leave.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Yes, we will need to recruit for that.
Okay, Don?
Yes, through you to Angie, or if Carrie is online, this is the second page, the community improvement plan. I was just wondering how that's going to be promoted, and how businesses are going to be informed, because what I find are the businesses that are related or on the Economic Development Committee seem to know a lot more about these promotions, if we can put it that way, than a lot of the outlying businesses that aren't totally connected that way. So I was just wondering how you planned on communicating that. I know when Carrie was on the television the other day, she did mention it, but if somebody really didn't understand the community improvement plan, I know she mentioned 70-30, but she didn't specifically say that the township would be putting in 70 and the business 30 and so on. So I'm just wondering how you're going to roll that out and inform the businesses.
Yeah, so we'll do that in a few different ways, Donna. We have all of the businesses that we're aware of, they're on our e-newsletter. So we send out a monthly newsletter to them. So we promote the CIP program that way. We also share the information with the Kawartha Chamber, the Peterborough Chamber, PCAD, so they share that information as well. We do a lot of social media. Of course, everything's on the website. One thing that we were mindful of as well, because we coordinate closely with building and planning, when we're aware of, sign permit applications or upcoming projects, we can reach out directly to the business to let them know that we can help them with a CIP program. So that has worked very well in the past.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
From the clerk's department? Anybody else? No? Okay. Financial services? Anybody? None? Okay. Fire department? Yes.
Not a question, just I understand that our fire department assisted the North Porth Fire Department with regards to the fire at Sayers Foodland in Apsley. So I just want to pass along, I guess, word of thanks to our department for the assistance they provided there.
And I should mention on that the mayor of North Kawartha did in fact extend her direct appreciation, which I passed on to the chief for the support from our firefighters. Also on the fire department, Don?
Yes, through you. Page 3, I don't know if the chief is on the line.
Yes, I am, Don.
Okay. The technology utilization, the very bottom of that page.
Yeah.
And you're mentioning the firehouse technology. It seemed to me that's the one that has been mentioned in other years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the one we're currently using.
So you're going to try and optimize it and use other sort of branches of that program. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, we're looking at Firehouse and the overall program in itself. It has changed in the last couple of years. Another company has bought it out and they have totally revamped it. And we're still trying to get answers whether this revampation has a big cost to it or not. So we are going to look at that and maybe possible another company that's out there. But I'm hoping that we can still utilize Firehouse because it is a great tool to pull off all kinds of information. But again, as usual, another company buys it up and totally has to revamp it. So it's a totally different look. It's just with this COVID thing and trying to get training online and everything else, it's just been a pain in the butt. So that's definitely be looking at that next year for sure.
Okay, thanks. And I think shadowing other fire departments is a good idea. That would be helpful to you. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. The burn bylaw. I forgot about that. Is that
Go ahead.
okay?
Yes.
I really do think that has to be a little more stringent and more follow-up and streamlined. I actually got, I've had a few complaints this summer about burning and lots of black smoke in certain areas, even specifically in Ennismore. And it was always a little questionable about whether it was legal or not. So that would be great if we actually knew the specific details on that.
Oh, definitely, Don. Yeah, we're tightening things up, definitely, and some numbers are going to be changed. Andrew's done a lot of work on it. He's actually been in cahoots with a lot of his comrades in the fire prevention industry and in the fire departments, and he's got some good stuff coming back. So, yeah, we wanted to try to get this through in December, but no, let's just get this right and we'll get it done in the first quarter.
Okay, that's good because there was actually just this month one business doing a great deal of burning, and I could talk to you sometime in private about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, the bylaw is there right now and it works, but a lot of people call in after the fact, and that's 911 is the best way for us to catch everybody in the act. So if you get those kind of complaints, Donna, send them to me and then just say, well, we have to catch them. Please call 911 so we can be there when it's happening.
Okay, thanks, Gord.
Okay, colleagues, just before we continue with the rest of these, we'll take a short break. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we'll begin again. We are on human resources. Any questions? Anita?
I just want to point out that the Human Resources will be assisting the customer service survey. I don't know if we're going to change the Qs from Q23 to Q34, but there is assistance from the Human Resources Department for that survey.
Anything else? No? Library? Any questions on the library? Go ahead, Don.
Is Sarah here?
I am, yep.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
This is the very first item. Determine the feasibility and practicality of full-time hours for library staff versus an additional part-time staff position. I just thought that it was worth explaining this to council, and they could have time to think about it. We've had our volunteer coordinators in place since either is this okay? The early part of Jones' tenure and possibly before. And it's getting more and more difficult. They're obviously getting older. And we've been talking for a period of time of how we could coordinate the volunteers and support the system, whether it be librarians, the CEO taking on more work or a part-time position. So, and we would probably be, because you have Q3 there, that likely means that it would be gearing up for the 2022 budget. So I wanted to just mention that to council so that I'm in agreement with, we do need some other support to help keep our volunteers and train our volunteers and coordinate them. So I just wanted to bring that out. And if there's something else you wanted to say about it, then.
Yeah, no, I think you basically covered it. I think that first and foremost, we'll start with the review of the volunteer model, just to make sure that we're able to provide meaningful and worthwhile opportunities for our volunteers, and that we're able to recruit and retain volunteers moving forward. And then it would be following that we would be reviewing the staffing model to ensure that we were able to adequately support that model.
So I think it's good that you've put it in this work plan so that it's not going to be a shock to anybody that we may need some more staff. And well, the very last, I guess it's not the last item, it's the end of page, or in the top part of page 3. There's been a real push in the library world to refresh indoor and outdoor library spaces. Our indoor spaces are fairly well refreshed, but especially with COVID and getting together, it's important to have outdoor spaces where the programming can take place or people can use the library materials in an outdoor setting. So that would be a cost factor as well. So that's something that we'd be looking into for this whole year. And I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that either.
Correct, yes. So with less space and trying to kind of discourage loitering in the branches, we've been exploring the idea of using our outdoor spaces. So in Bridge North here, we've been talking with both Mike Richardson and Scott with the idea of installing an awning just to that outdoor space at the Bridge North Library on the patio is not used at all. So just to try to encourage more usage there, and then kind of exploring options for shade shelters at the other branches as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on the library? Not seeing anything. Parks and Rec, Collins, yes, Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the first item there, the control panel at Lakefield Arena, how old is the current control panel? I know when we did the renovations there, I thought we had gotten some new equipment, but I'm just curious as to this control panel. How old is it?
It's more than 25 years old. They weren't 100% certain, but they know it was earlier than the mid 90s.
Further questions? Parks and Rec, Sherry?
Thank you. Through you to Mike, or to staff. The comprehensive review of the Lakefield campground, we've got in the time in Q1 to Q3. I'd really like to see it brought back to the public and done with at the end of Q2 if we can do it. It's gonna be another controversial thing, and I don't want it dragging into 2022. Don't know what my colleagues feel about that, but don't want another septic reinspection thing coming at us.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly do every effort, but the biggest concern with keeping it short is we don't want to ever appear to not be doing a comprehensive review. So we can certainly make note of that and do absolutely everything we can to keep it as brief as possible. But I think we would be making a bigger mistake if we ever appeared to be leaving somebody out or not being inclusive enough, especially in our COVID time here, where it can be a little bit more challenging to get people together, even if it is electronically or over line. But certainly duly noted that we would do everything we could possibly to make sure everybody's voice is heard in the fastest possible time frame.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. And what do you mean by naturalization of parkland in Ennismore, Lakefield, and Smith?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a space at each of the three parks. I know if I specifically talk about the Robert E. Young complex, at the back side, close to where we cut grass now, near the tractor pull and truck pull area, there's a spot that gets quite a few butterflies, and it would be a nice pollinator area. We would want to take a portion of that and allow some of the milkweed and some of those things to grow up instead of continuing to cut it, not impacting usable or space that we are programming on right now. I guess another good example would be at Douglas Sports Park, in between where the ball field is and where the tennis is. There's a buffer that's near the fence line that has trees in it, but allowing that to grow more naturally and just cutting a little less grass. We're not talking about acres upon acres, but we'd be talking about hundreds of feet by hundreds of feet in areas that are already an existing buffer zone. We identified one from each ward where we could do that, and it would just save time, save gas, and create a bit more natural habitat along buffer zones between existing forested areas and parkland.
Okay, will that attract snakes?
I'm not sure I'm enough of an expert on that to say how many snakes would be, or if snakes would be attracted, but I don't think it would keep them away. I think anytime we have a more naturalized area, all sorts of wildlife is going to be there, but it wouldn't put snakes on trails or put snakes in any closer proximity to where people are using or enjoying the parkland now.
And I have just one more question. Through you, the Jazz Festival and Shamrock Festival and the Literary Festival, what's the drop dead date on not going forward with them?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, Um, we were looking at end of March, early April, certainly for the 2 July events. I think they want to go a little earlier than that, but I think we could still, I think if we knew in that late spring, early spring timeframe, then I think they could still do them. The committees have not, we wouldn't really be pushing them for any sort of startup even on a meeting basis probably till January. But I would say, if we looked at the end of March, early April, the challenge is obviously that we still do a service guide that we try and have done in February. So we would have to make the decision if we want to put it in as tentative events. Their dates are still going to be consistently held. But I think it would be fair to look at March, early April to be fair to them, because they are all volunteer committees.
Okay, thank you.
Donna?
For you to Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
I'm thinking about the Scout building. I know we do have it on hold because of the high tenders, but I'm wondering if you're thinking that could be a potential project that we put off for 2021. I know you had high hopes for that building. We probably don't need it as a rental, but I'm not sure how pressing it is for the police facility. And it's probably pressing for storage. So I just wanted to ask you those questions about it.
I think you're right. Sorry again, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think you're right that from the police perspective, I don't think it's a super pressing issue, and we would rather have it done right and at in a reasonable time frame from the start to end schedule and at a reasonable cost. So I think the decision the council made the other day was best. But the storage right now, we could use it regardless. It's an older garage door to open and close, but that storage area we could use, right now if we had to. If we do get something like the barn demolition scheduled and had to move snow fence and whatnot over, then we would be able to do that, knowing that we'd have to empty it out. As a matter of fact, I believe we have 2 benches that just arrived from the States that we couldn't put in this winter that are on pallets in there right now.
Okay, that sounds good. I just had, do you want to say something about that, Lane?
Yeah, if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of points on the Scout building, and we'll be reviewing this in more detail when we bring back a report, but the red funding is one of the key factors there. So there was some conditional provincial funding that was going towards that building. And so we would have to have regard for that. It needs to be used by October of next year. And then the other point, because of the police and the potential move of the police, then that would open up space for accessibility to the second floor of that building on Queen Street as well. So there's a number of moving parts on that for sure. I think Mike is outlined from the recreation perspective and how that would impact it. And definitely this is the work plan for Parks and Rec, but there's a number of other moving parts in that whole program for sure.
Okay, that's good information. Thank you. And I just wanted to ask Mike one other thing. Have the curling club made a decision to open in January, or are they staying closed for the whole season?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the curling club has finally made a decision, and unfortunately it is to not open. They looked at the scenarios of opportunity versus revenue lost, and they've decided to forego the entire season. On a slightly different side note, I believe the only club in our entire area that decided to open, because Keene is open right now, Peterborough is open right now, or Peterborough Lansdowne is open. The only one that has decided to open that did stay closed in 2020 is Lindsay, and even that one right now is still. I was told they were opening, but I can't get that confirmed directly from the ice maker. So it's been a fairly consistent decision. Really keen, being that it's a shared ice plant and a shared operation with their arena. That's the only reason they open, because the cost difference is really negligible. That makes Peterborough the only one that's open for the whole year, and even they obviously aren't full.
Oh, that is too bad. What about the lease payment? Will they still have to pay their lease?
At this point, there was lease relief up until the end of October. I believe that would be up to council to decide what we would be doing going forward. But that was certainly part of some of the relief that was given to the various groups. So as of November 1st, I believe, and Lane certainly can correct me on this, but as of November 1st, I believe that program had ended, and they, knowing their treasurer fairly well, are budgeting to have to pay a lease, but that still is undecided as far as I know.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on that?
No.
Okay, so we are into Public Works. Any questions on Public Works? Not seeing any. That is it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to get to that. So there were three requests for changes. One, that the customer service be pushed out to Q3 and 4 so that it can reflect people using the new automated systems. That the Urban Hen issue be deferred to Q4, with an understanding that would mean any implementation would happen in 2022. And third, that we attempt to complete the review on the campgrounds by the end of Q2. I think, colleagues, they were the suggested changes. Yes.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible to make one further comment about the item you just mentioned, the campground going to Q12?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I wouldn't normally do this, but I think it's worth noting that input from campers and input from the user groups, which start typically on the 14th, 15th of May, will be very important. And we don't want to risk not having them included as a major user group and as a major stakeholder. So just wanted to put that reminder out there that if it starts, or if they start to arrive and be part of the picture in mid-May, Q2 will be tight.
Yeah, I think that what council is expressing, Mike, is that they would like it to get done as quickly as possible. Obviously, we want it to be comprehensive. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because if we're still in a COVID world, we're going to be doing most of this online, and whether those folks are here or whether they're somewhere else really should not be an inhibiting factor. I think council fully understands your legitimate desire to be as inclusive as possible, and I don't think anybody wants to take away from that. At the same time, I think what council is saying, to be as expeditious as you possibly can be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so those were the three items. Yes, Anita, you were.
I just want to register my agreement with Mike's comments with regards to not stopping it at Q12, that he makes valid comments. And I do know that COVID, you can do a lot of stuff online, but there's still a lot of people that potentially would not be participating in an online information survey. So I would like to not see it end at Q2. I totally agree with what Mike is saying with regards to you have to involve people that would be users of the campground. So that's just my comment.
Okay. Why don't I change that to as expeditiously as possible? Okay. Anybody comfortable with that? Good. Okay, so we want to receive them with those three changes. I need somebody to move that. Okay, Jerry, seconded by Anita. All those in favor? Okay, thank you, colleagues. And we are now into the budget presentation, I believe, Lee.
That's correct. To you, Mr. Mayor. So we have a report before council and a few attachments. The council would be used to seeing those with respect to assessment and some of those things. We just did receive the assessment rule quite late, so we're working through some of those things. But I'll be referring to the report. We also had some handouts today I will be referring to in a little bit, and then we'll just work through a PowerPoint presentation. So just a reminder of where we are in the process at our impacts discussion today in December. Couple changes on this slide, just to, council has weighed in on email, but just to make sure that everybody's clear. The consolidated budget presentation is now moved to January the 29th. So it's a week later. And so the budget binder will distribute a week in advance, but that would also be a week later. That allows us to provide council with a little bit better year-end figures. And then we'll look at the municipal budget adoption still on February the 9th. May recall last year we had presented a little bit different approach with our impact presentation, and we had basically proposed to council what different lens we were looking at when we were putting together a budget. So the presentation last year, we had touched on the rural aspect of our township and the various challenges that comes with it in terms of the geography and some of the various views of what people think of it when they think of rural. Also the climate change and that climate change lens and the impact that has on our operation and on the way that we do business, and the need for the community to look at the municipalities as a leader in that area. Technology and the emerging impact that technology has on our operation. And of course, because we're presenting budget, it's also financial sustainability and that interrelationship between something that's affordable, the community and what they expect, and then sustainability in the long term. And of course, what came out of some strategic plans and organizational reviews and things like that is the fact that municipalities continue to not only be stable in terms of our approach, in terms of our tax rate, but also we need to be innovative. So that was the lens that we were looking at last year. When we switched to 2020, of course, we were now required to look at life through a bit of a different lens, the COVID-19 lens. And so definitely customer service had to change and change rapidly for us. Health and safety of not only the staff, but our customers as well. So, hand sanitizer, masks, previously social distancing, now physical distancing became just not just phrases, but ways that we have to live. Remote workplaces and office workplaces and the combination of that, right? So some of us are still faced with having split teams and some of the impacts on time and tasks and just generally communication. So I just wanted to note our use of the technology in this area. We had a group that really kind of spun up some interesting and innovative approaches to technology. We needed to ensure that we had ongoing means of communication that were reliable and safe. And because we deal with sensitive information, we need to make sure that that's secure as well. So definitely our technology team really came to the forefront and took care of that. But there there are really daily challenges for us in terms of communication and technology. So we're relying on internet connections at home and things like that. So that, as council's aware, that isn't always reliable. So definitely my remote team and Angie's remote team has got really adept at, well, really adept at adapting. It's a constant challenge for them. Of course, council responded to COVID as well and supported our community. So the business reopening program, which as council knows was maximized. So their foresight there definitely was utilized by the business community. The support for not only business, but the building and the trades community with foregoing some of the building department's permit expenses. That was really taken advantage of to a certain extent by our community and kept building industry going. And so at the end, we utilized a little over $55,000 of building permit revenue to offset those. So that was the value of permits that really folks received because of council's approach. We definitely provided interest relief, penalty relief to folks in the early days of COVID, when folks were scrambling and they didn't really know whether they were going to have income support or a job or things like that. So the impact to the municipal budget was about $160,000. And then there's also an impact on our water and sewer rates as well. Once again, though, I think that supported the community and it's put us in a good position coming out of the early days of COVID. One of the unknowns a little bit, definitely for us at this point, moving into 2021 is the issue of lost revenues. And recreation and library are two areas for sure in terms of user fees and fundraising abilities and things like that. But definitely the general government area in terms of, just traffic through here and at times through the landfill site, although we've really responded well at the landfill site. So council is aware we did receive provincial support, over $500,000. So that will definitely help on those expenditure areas that I've outlined. And we do have an additional request in right now. And the additional request, not only for some expenses, but also more for the lost revenue area. So we're hopeful that the province would respond to that application as well. The deficits at the arenas, that's been something we've been dealing with for years, and council has received some reports from our manager there. We're taking some steps to minimize the deficit as much as we can, but it is at this point pretty much a systemic deficit, so we need to address that over the long term. But that deficits in both of those facilities were definitely affected by COVID as well. So with that kind of context or framework, we'll just get into some of the actual impacts overall. A reminder, of course, we did present council with the capital budget. We will have some updated projects to present to council as part of the presentation in January. So we were fortunate to get probably 95% of one of our sidewalk projects actually done in the fall. So that project will probably fall off of the capital program. We have Water Street, which is still a bit of an unknown, but definitely some funding that will go in there for design work to get through the final design. But the presentation today will really be impacts that affect either many departments or the whole corporation, and having regard for the work plans that council has already received and the service delivery reviews that they received a few meetings ago. They're all in play as we go through. So just before we get to some expense areas, talk about some of our various areas of funding. So definitely some good news from the province in terms of two grant areas for me. They confirmed the UMP funding, the municipal partnership funding. So that's been confirmed for 2021, and that's our largest unconditional grant. The increase there is $13,900. Another grant that was recently confirmed, hadn't been confirmed at our capital meeting, was the OC funding, and that's primarily for asset management, the focus on asset management, and then ongoing maintenance out of asset management. So that was confirmed at the same level as 2020. a little over $178,000. And that isn't unconditional, but it does provide flexibility under that asset management area. A few more conditional provincial grants that will be in the final budget document the council sees. The RED grant, if we can move forward on the various areas that the RED grant will fund, public washrooms down in that scout building area, downtown amenities, and also streetlight replacement in terms of our decoratives and things like that, and converting those over to LED. And so there's an instance where those different lenses that we are looking at, not only it brings in the issue of climate change, but also brings in community development and a different look as well. A standard that's been in our budget is the RIDE grant. And so we were approved again for a RIDE grant for the OPP. And of course, our library operating grant, it hasn't changed in decades, but it's good to know that that money is coming from the province and comes in as a core funding area up in that area. We do have a number of applications that are outstanding. So the Safe Restart Phase 2 that we talked about, the ISIP Resiliency Fund to do with the changes for customer service at the front here, and then not particularly a provincial grant, but supported through provincial funds, the Ontario Trillium Foundation grant for Makerspace for the library. So that was a province. Over to the federal partner. Our one source of stable funding for roads is the federal gas tax. And so we saw a marginal increase there as well in terms of our grant. So that's over $500,000. So that comes in to support contracted services or any type of material that we would purchase from an outside source in the roads area. And just a bit of a reminder as well to council, we did receive that one-time grant from the federal gas tax, which has been committed towards the Water Street project and then additional resurfacing. So we're still doing additional resurfacing on an annual basis with those funds. And just a small note there in terms of a text box with respect to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So the FCM grant, we have support there for climate change and any of those initiatives that we're moving ahead for 2021. So some stats, just some other factors that we're taking into account when we bring the budget forward. And this is like a point in time review. So we took a look at CPI, all items, Canada and Ontario. That was at 0.7% at the end of October. Rate of inflation at that same time was 0.62. And the CPP indexing rate for 2021 was 1%. And so that's just factors that we look at as a management team, recognize the environment that we're operating in when we bring forward a budget to council. And of course, also taking a look at interest rates as well. So depending on what you invest in or what you're locked into, interest rates also will have an impact on folks' ability to respond to the ongoing COVID environment. So to get over to assessment, which is one of our primary areas of funding for municipal government, property assessment, the true growth was 0.86% in actual assessed value, and council has some handouts on that. For comparison, last year was 1.27%. So that isn't to say that the growth wasn't as high. It is probably more, it recognizes the impact of COVID on the assessment cycle. But I do want to recognize the efforts of MPAC, especially the local office and Haynes and her group there. We had discussions in early Q3, and the numbers were nowhere near as high as 0.86, and they actually really had a tremendous effort to get some local folks on the ground and into the office and out, ensuring that they got as much assessment as possible by the end of the year. So they did a great job there in terms of having that impact. Of course, COVID froze the CVA reassessment provincially. And so the values that we're looking at, that true growth number, 0.86, essentially is what our assessment roll was returned at. Now the taxable assessment for CVA was 0.88. The 0.86 takes into account all growth, whether it's taxable or PIL. growth. So maybe not as great as other years, but still good growth that we were recorded. And as I say, we know that there is more growth. So I'm hopeful that the supplementaries and the omits, when they come through as well, will provide some additional revenue. So I took a look at the true growth and ran through the calculations that we would typically do, and then took away the 2020 levy, and it shows us that our impact on due to growth, we could reset our spending threshold, basically $67,000 roughly. As council will recall, last year we also began to have regard for the area rate room for policing to be able to use those funds to offset similar areas in terms of protective services and fire service. So we're looking at total tax room of a little more than $91,000. And so that's really spending room without an impact on existing ratepayer taxation. So that's available to offset some of these other costs that are just naturally increasing in the budget.
With regards to your previous slide, so the current value assessment is frozen at 2016 levels values, and I know that's on a 4-year cycle. So if they do the CVA next year for a 4-year cycle, will it be for the 4 years, or are they going to kind of back it up and do it on a 3-year?
Yeah, I don't know what their approach is going to be on that. I think my thought would be they would still do a 4-year phase in. It's just what they'll use for that value. Will they go back to January 2020, or will they actually delay and bring it to January 2021? So yeah, I'm not totally sure. And I know Erica in particular was sitting in on some impact webinars just to try to get some additional information on that. Definitely, if whatever I know at the January meeting, I'll bring that forward at that time. For sure. Okay, so to move away from revenues and assessment over to some of the other impacts or on the expenditure side. So obviously we're a service business, so human resources is always an impact. Our cost of living adjustments this year would be our minimum cap at 1.5%. We've talked about our staffing in terms of the building, planning, and bylaw enforcement. And because of how we've typically done that, we always look at phasing it in, trying to maybe look at revenues that we wouldn't always use, but maybe use them in that first year of the phase in, and then try to blend that impact over a year or two. So definitely that's our game plan. We have our work plan impacts in terms of the internal resource commitments that we have reviewed already, and then those service delivery review recommendations, which will have an impact on how staff and the managers do their work this year as we bring those reports forward to council for implementation. And one of the other rates that went up fairly significantly was our WSIB rate. The rate went from, I think it was 285 per 100 up to 330 per 100. And buried within that rate increase also is the consolidation of rates, so that the library service, which used to get a lower rate, is now lumped into that as well. So I think just a rough figure I did yesterday is about $17,000 impact just on that in terms of premiums. So yeah, so it's I know that we still enjoy a rate in terms of local government because of how it's spread over all the areas. So from the office right through the public works, it's quite a consolidated bit of work that's being done there. But yeah, that was a sizable increase and something that I hadn't really anticipated until I got looking at it a little bit closer.
Thank you. Through you to Lane, with the 16% increase, everybody else's rates are plummeting like they jumped out of a plane without a parachute. Why did we go up? We looked at our claim. No, there's a form in there.
Yeah. So through Mr. Chair. Yeah, so there's definitely our format's a little different in terms of we get peer reviews and those types of things. Those are based on the actual claims history and things. This is just basically shifting the overall rate for our category. And so I guess I might look at that and think, well, in some instances, maybe we're we're picking up some of the slack in some of these other areas. I think the big thing for WSIB, they just, the change in why some of the rates could go down is they just stopped funding their unfunded liability, right? So that was just basically a flip of a switch, and all of a sudden you don't need to fund your liabilities, right? So that was a legislative change on how they actually did that. I think our group has been fairly stable over the years, and so, you know, as I say, at 285 to 330, it's still not maybe a big increase when you look at some of the other category areas, but it's a big increase for us for sure. Okay, and so onto technology, and I just want to take a little bit there. I had distributed a couple of handouts as well to support this slide, and I know it's an important topic to council. So I'll refer to those slides at a given point as well. And I just wanted to point out that the slide that you see before you now has been retooled since the one that I showed you in as part of the capital budget. So we have made some amendments to that, maybe just to make it a little easier to follow along. And also using Angie's comment there, we included a legend on the bottom of the handout just to try to make sense of that. And to recognize that really what we're showing here is a very simplified version of what we're looking at when we talk about technology. And that my IT gang would be the first ones to point out that like almost every one of these panels has got 4 or 5 sub panels below it, right? So you've got application software and databases, and then how they connect to from a software perspective versus hardware. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts on it. But if you were to look at the just a slide, first of all, the big gray box is what we look at as our fully integrated software. So basically when something happens in any of those modules, it automatically is posted to the general ledger. There's no additional exporting, importing, anything else like that. Any of the green boxes at this point have been implemented, and in many instances have been implemented for upwards of 6 months, and things are working along well. In other instances, they've just recently been implemented and we're still working through some of the kinks. The yellow boxes are works in progress. And so obviously Parks and Rec, we have that software now, an existing Parks and Rec software, but there are some possible improvements we can make. So we're looking at that, and anything in yellow is a high priority in progress. And then the blues, save and accept the internet at the top, which of course is always a bit of a work in progress based on connection and things like that. But the blue boxes on the left-hand side are those areas that we're going to be coming out of our work plan or the service delivery reviews. And while they are there on the work plan, they just aren't as high a priority for us at this particular point in time, just because of the impact on the operation and on the financials.
Lane, can I just interrupt you for a second? So you're saying that the module that we're looking at for the planning department, I think we've had those discussions quite a bit, is in the blue category. It's not something that's imminent or being worked on?
At this point in time, right now, I don't have a software that I can point to, so I can't look at it right now, right?
Well, I understood we were looking at a module. In fact, we were testing it, and that it was about to be launched.
That is correct. It is about to be launched, but I can't really tell you how that's going to integrate at this point in time with anything else, right?
So
the building
refers to your integration, not to getting it done.
I would say it's a combination of two things. So at this point in time, we have the building software. We have acquired it. We are in the stages of implementing it and rolling it out. And so that's why it's in yellow and trying to figure out how it's going to interact. The planning software, we've not yet paid the bill. We haven't yet acquired it and paid that implementation fee. And that is something that will be taking place in the first quarter, but it's not taken place yet. So that's kind of just a high level overview of how the parts all connect, right? And I just want to assure council that we're giving this a lot of effort. And in 2020, we really embarked on the largest technology upgrade since amalgamation. So this is the biggest piece of technology change since in the last 20 years. We not only did we put that effort to it, but then we had COVID to contend with as well. So there are a lot of moving pieces. We were implementing additional functionality. We wanted to make sure that we entered data once, and we wanted to implement a forward-facing customer access portal at the same time, right? So all those different pieces. And so we did everything that's outlined there in green. The tech team was established, and Erica is our coordinator, and is in a situation where she is trying to not only stick handle being remote and being off-site, but also pushing not only her direct supervisor, but also her manager to get stuff done so that she can get stuff done, right? So it's kind of an interesting situation for her to be in, to basically, to say to their manager, let's get your butt in gear and get this thing done, right? So we made a lot of progress, and throughout this whole environment that we're working in, we also tried to keep in mind that we wanted to have cross-training as something that we took out of it. So you wouldn't just have one specialist, especially given the business continuity and things that we're trying to have regard for. And so when you look at other folks up in the office that have the ability to work with that software, that was another key component. So overall, I would say at the end of this, that our capabilities with respect to our software have increased as well. So not to say it's done, it's always a work in progress, but we're moving things ahead. And I think particularly important to council, I talked a lot about the back end, but the front end, the recent rollout of virtual town hall and our municipal app, to do that in this environment is really just a testament to the dedication that the staff had to it, and Erica and Megan in particular, and some of the promotional material that they put out in the last little bit, it's top notch. We were chatting the other day, and the idea of me going to the photocopier doing arts and crafts to put together a poster to get out to folks, right? Those days are over. Megan has just brought promotion to a whole new level, and the ability for them to swap information digitally is just amazing. So they're doing great work. The service delivery reviews, they confirm things that we suspected in many areas. They provided an objective recommendation on where we should go. And so in all these other areas that we've outlined on the grid that are in blue, they're definitely areas that we're going to be implementing and as soon as possible and as soon as we can get things in line. I think the best way to look at it, and probably Parks and Rec software might be the easiest way to look at it. We have some Parks and Rec software. It provides the ability for the public to look at space. They can see if it's available. They can book that space. But that particular software just hasn't got the back end to be able to follow through and be able to invoice and get that into our system and the money in the bank and all those types of things, right? So that's what we're working on right now. Mike's had some initial progress with the software provider, and we'll be getting our tech team involved in that here just shortly. But the next step, if all of that doesn't work, then is a major investment, right? So we're kind of at that level where we're in that 20,000 population. From there to jump to the next level, the dollar value of investment in software is huge. So we're trying to do everything we can to make the existing software work and make it work without duplicating efforts. But because it's in the service delivery review, we'll still have some opportunity to come back to council and actually go over some things in the future there. So our goal throughout this process is to move our software from being what I've referred to before as very transactional. Folks come into the counter, they pay a bill, we give them a receipt and they go away. We're trying to move that to be more of an innovative way that they can interact and just live their lives. So they can use it on the internet, we can interact with each other. As soon as you start to introduce hybrid models where they can do it in person, on an app, on the website, all those different areas, right? It brings with it a level of complexity. And that's not to say it can't be done. It's just you need to take a look at the cost of doing all those things for a municipality of our size. And that's what we're trying to do and always recognize that there's only so many dollars. So we're trying to move our software from being a very transactional process to taking it to something that's more strategic and a strategic way of how we do business. And that's what's expected by certain components of our community. And that's what we're trying to do. So there's definitely going to be operational efficiencies, improved customer service, and I hope more satisfying interactions overall, so that however our customers want to pay a bill or reach out to the municipality or find information or those types of things, then it will be a more satisfying interaction. There are cost implications of doing so. Our annual maintenance costs are definitely going to increase because as you have more moving parts in software, those costs are going to go up. Or some of our software suppliers now are looking at more of a subscription-based approach, which means it's no longer a one-time capital outlay and some updates once in a while. It's now an annual expense, and that will impact our operating budget every year. But we are committed to not only implementing these components, but working with them, but also maximizing their use and integrating wherever possible. The whole idea of inputting once, not only does it save time, but it also ensures that you don't have errors down the road, right? So that's what we're trying to accomplish. So hopefully that has provided council with a bit of background on, as to where we have been and where we're going with respect to technology. I did include another handout there, which is the update on the modernization grant. And so a big section of the work that we are able to do was definitely thanks to that provincial modernization grant. I've updated that from last year's budget and any of the things that we've done already and updated council on. So you can see the top part are either our commitments or our expenditures to date. Additional technology software efficiencies that are outlined and I've just went through that are would be included in the draft budget. So when it all, and you can look at some of these numbers and realize that some of them are rounded up to the nearest thousand. So, but we're in around $105,000 of funding that's just still available for use. And for some of our future considerations, whether we're looking at any additional upgrades or a version change or different things like that. And that's just with respect to this grant, right? We do have other reserves that are available should some of these other expenses come in higher, or we need to retool and look at things in a different way. But that's an update to council on technology, at least, and where we are with the modernization grant.
So there's, with the 105,000 that's still left, what do you foresee spending it on?
Yeah, so thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as we get into some of our point of sale devices, say at the landfill site, at the marina, possibly maybe at the arenas, right? There could be some of that. One of the things in the landfill site report was that, of course, the landfill doesn't even have internet access at this point in time. We would anticipate, if we sign up with the provider, that they would provide service to the door, so basically to the building, but then there would be some costs there. And then with respect to that landfill site software, it's quite proprietary. So we would have to take a look at how that's going to interact and whether we would need some more hardware there to do that. So that would be kind of one example. I think Fire Chief had mentioned too on Firehouse, we need to take a look at that version of Firehouse and ensure we're up to speed on that, or if we need to maybe do a bit of an upgrade. So those are some of the areas for sure that we would take a look at. Probably the largest area of expense could be recreation software, but at this point in time, we're trying to look at just some interim steps first and see what we can do. And Mike and I are definitely in heavy discussions on that right now. Okay, so just to move on from that, over into asset management, which is, of course, another project that I continue to talk to council about. It's consumed a lot of effort and funding to date. The goal, of course, my personal goal, but I think the goal of most treasurers is to create a working document that has some meaning, right? If if we wanted to, I would say probably 2 years ago, we could have paid a consultant to put together an asset management plan, and we'd have it upstairs, and I might refer to it once in a while, but I don't know if it would really make for a useful document. So what we're trying to do is put together a document that is really based on sound data. So we've spent a lot of time to collect data on our roads and our underground services. We're just completing the stormwater management plan at this point in time. As part of that, it isn't just a data collection because council will recall that as part of stormwater, for instance, there'll be a flushing and camera work as well. So we're actually doing maintenance on that as we go, same as we did on the sanitary sewer. Out of the document, I'm really hoping that there will be a high level of coordination between roads, water, sewer, and storm sewer in terms of our decision making. So when we start to improve a road, and that isn't just in an urban section, that's a rural section as well, we want to make sure that we have regard for stormwater. And I think a good example is that if you look down and say one of our projects this year in storm is McConnell Drive. So that's very much an urban, or sorry, a rural area, a bit of a cluster of homes, but very much a rural area. But that is, there's going to be a lot of investment there, really just for an underground stormwater pipe that goes to a lake, right? So there's a lot of dollar value involved in it, but we need to make sure that we track all those wherever they are in the municipality. So as I mentioned, I want to make sure that this document, when it comes forward, is useful. It'll make for an extremely busy Q1 and Q2, but primarily Q2. And I know that council wants to be involved in the process as we get the report together and start to finalize some of these things to do with levels of service that we provide to the community and our financial strategy. So at this point, I'm thinking an interim report in April, some updates and draft reports in May, and then final report in June. So that's roughly the timeline. And when I have those months, because we have 2 meetings in each month, maybe we may have to do that. But my thought is that once the kind of the management team gets all the data in place, we have a chance to kind of put together a draft and get it before council. Then council will have their opportunity to put their stamp on it. I know that the issue of levels of service is an area that traditionally councils have been actively involved in and trying to understand and have an input on and then provide direction. And also the financial strategy is one of those areas that it tends to be one of the last points that's, and it tends to be a sticking point because in many instances, some of the investments that are required are long-term investments over many years. But I guess I can just say that this is, I think I mentioned it before, this is not a report that I would intend on bringing to council at the last council meeting before the deadline and saying here it is. So there'll be lots of opportunity to talk about it. Some other operational issues that will also impact all the departments. Insurance, and Angie has a report on the agenda later today. We have another insurance premium increase. This is the second year of a fairly large increase after years of what I would say are fairly moderate increases. We don't have our full detail yet on the premium, but I'd anticipate based on some percentages last year that the impact of the increase is probably going to be about $68,000 on the tax budget. Now, having said that, there are some areas of the tax budget even that are city arenas and things like that that have other user fees that may be able to offset that a bit. So that's a fairly significant impact that's going to be felt across the municipality. Our community improvement plan, this is our third year of a 4-year phase in there to increase the funding for our private sector. So the increase there was another $25,000. So this year's increase is another $6,250. And of course, based on council's direction related to our COVID relief as well, there'd be some additional expenditure allowed in this year's budget, but that would come from reserves to offset. Of course, those reserves have been built up over a number of years. So, you know, if the uptake is as good as we hope it's going to be in supporting the community, then we'll need to have regard for that over the next few years to put aside reserve dollars again. Kind of jumping over a number of areas, if council's familiar with our financial statement outline, not a lot of discussion with respect to roads and winter control and some of those things which we know are going to have an impact on the budget. But in terms of looking at things that are going to consume a lot of time and effort, just switching over now to waste management. Two areas. Our waste collector and that contract, it expires this year. It expired last year and we extended it. Or is it 2 years? Expired in 2019, so we extended it to 2021. And so the hope there is that we would probably take a look at that and investigate an additional extension. But that'll be a bit of an unknown when we actually set our budget, and we'll have to use some projections with respect to the number we actually put in the budget. Waste diversion initiatives are continuing, and that's our goal there is to extend the useful life of the landfill while still maintaining the service level that we provide. But of course, one of the things that I wouldn't doubt council will be hearing about this year is our clear bag implementation program. So, we've been in the promotion stage since March of 2020. Yeah, March of 2020 is when we started the promotion, and it really isn't the hard, fast implementation isn't until September of 2021. But waste is definitely one of those areas that tends to attract a lot of discussion. You'll see it impacted on our service delivery review on the operations, and so it isn't just on the curbside and how that's going to be handled, but basically how we're going to handle it at the landfill site as well when it comes across the scale, and is it permissible if it isn't in a clear bag, and all those different things. So there'll be lots of discussion as we work through 2021. But just to get that again on council's radar, that it's this fall that we would actually do the clear bag implementation, kind of in a more concerted way. Jumping over to the arenas, and as I mentioned, it's not to say that recreation and that department and festivals and things like that aren't impacted. They will be, but just to kind of move over to the arenas and the impact of COVID here, and on the numbers that we can gather. And so this is probably one of the, to me, or for me, and I guess for Mike as well, one of the hardest areas to come together in terms of a revenue projection and something that's defendable. And that we can present to council. So it's definitely one of those areas that was hardest hit in early days. And any of the areas where we have areas of congregation are still really subject to change at any point in time. So the challenges of revenue projection are going to be there for sure. At the arenas, also we're seeing the impact of the service delivery review on operations. And ongoing outreach with user groups, the junior C discussions, all of those things will be a challenge for Mike and his crew in 2021. With respect to library services, the board has a new plan and an updated look and focus. Sarah's been involved in this one, so it's great that as the I wouldn't say new CEO because she's been at it for a few years now, but as a CEO of the library, she now has her own plan that she can kind of work through with her crew and try to get in place and work with the board's guidance. At its core, though, it's still very much supporting the volunteer model. As was mentioned earlier, they're going to start looking at some staff resourcing options there and how that's will roll out in the future. Our model tends to be not the preferred volunteer model that is being used across the province, but it still works well, and we still are able to attract volunteers. The key, I think, is, as you heard Sarah say, is we want to ensure that we're providing meaningful opportunities for the volunteers in the library. And we recognize that volunteering in the library is only one aspect of it, that it's also a real sense of community that's established there, and it benefits our entire community if that volunteer base is strong and positive and they have a positive experience. So we'll be taking a look how that can continue to roll out, and we can continue to support them moving forward. I can't really move on without pointing out the efforts of the library staff in terms of the COVID environment and how they were able to spin up online resources, new means of connecting in a really quick way. They looked at some different resources. We brought in Cloud Library this year, and because of some funding that they had received, they also looked at Hoopla, which is an online means of getting resources. That also allows some movie rentals and things like that as well. So they're looking at different ways of connecting, and some of the programming that they were able to do online, and then some of the innovative programming after the fact when they could open the libraries back up again. They really did a great job there. So they're continuing to be affected by COVID, but they're rolling out some innovative programming there. The restart funding that we had talked about that we got from the province, that will benefit the library in terms of offsetting some of their lost fundraising resources and some of their lost operating fees there as well. So that's kind of our departments and reviewing that. I just got a couple more slides to go through with respect to some other components of the tax bill. Autonomy conservation, the Orca municipal levy actually, based on the information I looked at, I think went down, the overall levy went down 1.3%. Primarily the changes were with respect to the Millbrook Dam being completed and the Warsaw Dam, I think, coming online. But because of how assessment works and the cost sharing and things, our portion of the levy actually goes up marginally, 1.4%. So our levy actually goes up by about $3,300. Now that is an external separate tax rate. So that's something that's clear on the tax bill, but we're a member municipality, and so that's our job to fund that and move it ahead. And I noticed just to change up the slide a little bit this year, they do have some online technology that's coming on stream as well. So I think Dan and the crew in there are doing a great job in terms of reaching out to the customers and getting their message out. Two police area rate slides. So the first one is the OPP for our rural wards. We did have a 2019 year-end adjustment. If council recalls, we're always 2 years behind when we're actually dealing with it. So the 19 adjustment will be dealt with in the 2021 budget year. So we had our second year of actually having a charge as opposed to a rebate, fairly nominal charge, but a charge nonetheless. So that will impact our accumulated revenue. We do have our estimate for 2021. So following council's direction from years past, our area rate would equal the contract amount. And then any of the accumulated revenue or any other ancillary revenues take care of any of the other expenses that are there. So I can say fairly confidently that we would have an area rate decrease in 2021 with respect to the OPP. That's at least what I'm anticipating. With respect to the police costs in Lakefield, of course, we're operating there under a different relationship, under a contract relationship. Our 2021 schedule cost is up in around 2%, a little over $11,000, and that was just received. We had been making contributions to reserves because of the contract relationship that we had there, but I think if we do make any contribution in 2021, it will be fairly small, hoping to set aside some money. The good news is that we haven't had any additional chargebacks from the city in 2020. So that's good. And so I do have intentionally on here, it's either a hold or decreased. I just don't necessarily have enough information right now to be able to say to council, but so I'm suggesting it'll be the same area rate or a decrease for 2021. So that's kind of the review of the impacts, and I know I spent quite a bit of time on some different components of them, but council has any other questions? Hopefully I can answer them, or I think we still have the management team on the line as well.
Colleagues, questions? Sorry.
I thank you for the work that you've done to bring this to us. It's very comprehensive as usual, and I'm prepared to move the recommendation that is on the slide. It includes something over and above what was in the report. Those to receive the report, and that the treasurer include the impacts and projects as presented today in the consolidated 2021 taxation budget document to be presented on January the 29th, 2021.
Janice, did you want to say something? No? Okay, go ahead.
Normally, and this is probably too early, maybe this is what the meeting on January 29th is, but in the past, a 1% tax increase equaled about, I think, $60,000. Is that too early for you to sort of, announce now, or is that going to be in January?
It would be in January, but I don't anticipate, it wouldn't go down, so it could be probably marginally higher than that, but in around that $60,000 to $65,000 range. Yeah.
So the second part of that recommendation is that you're going to include those in the presentation in January, which time council can decide whether it wants to undertake those expenditures. Correct? Yep. Yes, Donna?
I would just second the deputy mayor's motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Okay, colleagues, we have 3 other reports I think that we need to deal with this morning. I think they are going to take us quite as much time, but so we have first off the insurance program.
Chair, can everybody hear me okay? I understood maybe you were having some difficulty hearing earlier.
I'm going to have to stop. We just can't hear you.
Sorry, you can't hear me at all?
We can hear you, but you're garbled.
Okay, I'm a little bit closer. Is that any better?
It's a little bit better. Go ahead. Let's try it.
Okay, I apologize. I'll do my best. Thank you. So we just received the insurance documents late last week, and you will note that there is an increase in the township's insurance premium. Certainly Lane set the table during his presentation, so the council had some information about that in the presentation. The increase is about okay. So Mr. Chair, I can come downstairs if you want to wait for a moment.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, very good.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't realize the mic was that bad. Yeah, so Lane had alluded to the fact that our insurance premium has gone up significantly again. And I came down here without my glasses, so I'm gonna have to try to read my writing. So it did go up 17%. Thank you. Oh boy, there we go. That's better. It did go up 17% again this year. So that does definitely have an impact on the taxation portion of the budget. The premium did go up in last year's premium by 21%, so that's definitely significant. It's a sign of the times. The market is very hard in insurance. The increases really are in liability. We're up almost $35,000 in that particular premium alone. Cyber has also gone up significantly, but that is an area of insurance, pardon me, that is new, and it's definitely something that across the market, we're seeing more types of those types of claims. Okay, there we go. So we would also recommend that we would provide another submission to the Attorney General, again, with respect to joint and several liability. This is something that does have a direct impact on municipal liability premiums. So as you know, if we are found to be 1% liable in a claim, we can end up paying a good portion of the bill because, of course, our coverage is significantly higher than the typical, individual homeowner that might only have $2 million in coverage. So the recommendation would be that we renew the policy again with Frank Cowan, and that we would make another submission to the Attorney General again about the joint and several liability.
Questions? Sherry?
Thank
Donna?
you, through you. Quite a while back, council requested a report on the insurance claims that we have had come before us as a corporation, and we haven't seen the report. Not sure if one goes with the other. We won't know till we see it. And I'm wondering when that report will be coming forward to council. I recognize it has to come in closed.
We can definitely provide the information about the claims history. If you want to discuss any of the claims in particular, we would need to do that in closed session. So I can certainly provide a report that outlines the types of claims we've had over the past 10 years. And if you wanted to then move into closed session to talk about any of the particular claims themselves, we can do that.
Please.
Yep, we can do that.
Yes, Donna?
Yes, for as long as I can remember, we've been lobbying about this joint and several liability, and we never see any change. I'm just wondering if you have any idea as to why the province is rooted in not making this decision.
I think because it's just not a simple solution. So as soon as they make a change, it has an impact on the entire insurance market. So they're probably a little bit reluctant to just implement this without considering how it will impact everybody else that is insured. Because at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay the claim. So if we take less of a role, that means other sectors, including businesses or individuals, will have to pick up the slack.
So do you think they're actually looking at it, or they're just ignoring it?
They definitely were looking at it prior to COVID. I suspect that their priorities have changed, but it was something that was definitely on the radar. So I think we just need to keep tapping at the door.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Somebody want to move the recommendation? Carrie moved the recommendation. Anita will second. All those in favor? That's carried. We have one consent item. That's the budget amendment for this year. Anybody want to move that from Anita? Seconded by Donna. All those in favor? And we have one other item, I believe, under new business, which was a question in response, or an answer in question to I'll get this right. It was an answer to a question that we posed last Tuesday. So everybody's had a chance to review that. Does anybody need any clarification on that, Sherry?
I don't need any clarification. And although this isn't the outcome we were trying to achieve by asking the question, it is an improvement over the original plan because it now includes 2 spots for accessible parking. and doesn't compromise the number of parking spots with their addition. So I think it was worthwhile to go through the exercise to ensure we have a couple of spots. And I thank staff for bringing it forward.
Okay, any other comments? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important that this information also be forwarded to the Trail Committee and Parks and Rec and anybody else who may have provided comment with a request to have the trail extended. The layout and the information does make a lot of sense with regards, especially to they're talking about the drop off where the hill is. I can't remember what they called it. Oh, steep, a slope, steep 3-to-1 slope. So I think it's important that maybe this information gets passed along to.
It was actually sent this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Just a second. Donna had it.
Yes. I just also want to say that I'm glad that we checked everything to make sure that we were considering the best option for the most number of people. I know that decisions don't always satisfy everybody, but I am satisfied that we have, and I'm definitely satisfied now that we have made the right decision.
So understanding the comments from council that was just made, and in that we did not actually change anything at our Tuesday meeting. The will of council is to just receive that information and not take any additional action. Is that correct? Okay, so
I believe what the recommendation from council was that we don't take any action until this information's been received. So I think now it would be appropriate to give staff the authority to move forward with this option, including the 2 accessible spaces.
okay, good. Do I move that? Donna? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Okay, that I believe concludes our agenda. Do we need a confirming bylaw? Yes, we do. Anita and Sherry. Okay, all in favor? Okay, and adjournment? Jerry, Donna? Great, thank you, colleagues. I don't know. It is.
Anita, do you want an
I'm gonna,
permit?
it's up to individuals. I'm gonna wear my mask.
Do you want this? Does anybody else want one of these? Anita? You don't want one?
No, I'll take one. If everybody else is gonna wear one, I can. How do you, just put it on, because I don't know how that works. How's that look?
You look very cute.
Okay.
Your horns or your antlers need to be turned forward.
Like this?